Welcome to the Facing Up Club, where we discover life beyond belief. I'm Dr. Maury Robertson, or at least I used to be. Back in the 90s, I started a church that was pretty darn successful. I led it for over 20 years. Along the way, I got a PhD in New Testament. I became a professor at a major seminary. I met a beautiful girl and married her. We had 3 great kids. I built my own house. I was your basic upstanding citizen. But along the way, something really inconvenient happened. I stopped believing. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It's not like a bomb went off. It was more like a termite infestation. And I just know that it resulted in this horrible sense of confusion and suffocation. And it got to the point that I really had no choice but to resign my church. And it wasn't because I had some plan B. It was just that plan A was over. I had no idea what would happen next. Well, I went on to teach for the seminary for a little while, and then Julie and I hit the road and traveled for a few years. We moved to Seattle, where I worked for my brother-in-law in a hardware store. It wasn't very glamorous. In fact, I was a stalker. I got up at 4 a.m. to stock shelves, and the irony of that, after having climbed to the top of this mount of, church success and seminary success, and now I'm stocking shelves, and it was so weird. And I remember one night when we were there in Seattle, I walked into the kitchen. My wife was doing the dishes, and she had this plate in her hand, and I had just finished teaching an online Greek course, and it had gone really well, and I was sort of feeling pretty full of myself, like, I did a good job tonight. And I walked in there and I said, Julie, it is so weird to be so good at something that you can't do anymore. And she just slowly looked up at me and she said, how did you lose your faith? It was a genuine question. It wasn't an attack. It was almost like, when I lose my keys. How'd you lose your keys again? It was like, how did you lose your faith? And the reason that hit me so hard that night is because it's the first time I realized that I had lost it and it wasn't coming back. I had lost it for good. See, like most people who believe in something, whether it's religion or whatever, there are times when we doubt. There are times when it's difficult to believe, and we fight through that and we find a way to believe again. Well, I had done that a lot of times as a Christian, but that night I realized that I had lost my faith and it wasn't coming back, and I would have to learn to live without it. How did I lose my faith? I guess sort of like I lost my hair. Somewhere in my 30s, it started falling out piece by piece. And then one day I looked in the mirror and it was all gone. But that really began what for me was the most terrible time of my life. 3 horrible years of confusion and darkness. I guess what people call a dark night or an existential crisis or whatever you want to call it, hell. I was confused. I just felt like my life had no point. I felt like I was completely worthless. And I couldn't talk really to my old friends about this, my church friends, because their solution, understandably, would have been to point me back to God, to revive my faith, and I knew that was over. I remember just being so angry at myself. I felt so stupid. I felt like I was the last kid to stop believing in Santa Claus. It was horrible. It's hard even to find the words to describe how dark that feels. I wanted to be dead, literally. I wasn't at the point of killing myself, but I wanted it all to be over. If you have ever been in that place, or maybe if you are in that place right now, you know what I'm talking about. Very slowly, I started to be okay. And then after a while longer, I was more than okay. In fact, I began to feel at peace. life began to feel meaningful again. And in fact, more meaningful than it had ever felt when I was a Christian. And it's not that I found answers. It was because I faced up to the fact that I didn't have answers and began to learn to live without them. I'm sharing my story because I suspect I'm not alone. If you're a person whose faith has shattered and you're wondering what comes next, and it's maybe you're in that terrifying place, I hope you'll find encouragement here, maybe even friendship. When I went online in this state, I found a lot of sites that were eager to deconstruct Christianity, to blow it up. And I had kind of already done that. And also, I wasn't angry about it. I wasn't looking to just like chop off this part of myself. I was looking more for a bridge from what I was to who I am now. And so my real question is what comes next, which is why the tagline of Facing Up is life beyond belief. There's a little poem that I share that probably share too much, but it's not some brilliant poem or anything, but it came to me as I was going through this, and it really does describe my journey. It goes like this. I was a preacher, a professor, a Godsplainer, a rock. Then my high pulpit crumbled. I thought I would land, but just kept falling. So I traded my firm foundation for a set of wings and made my home on a rush of wind. So when I say facing up, I mean it in two senses. The first is just facing up to the facts, like truly admitting that I have questions that don't have answers. I have longings I can't satisfy. I do not understand why this world is so predatory and why people can be so horrible. I don't understand all those things, but I face these things. I don't hide from these things. I face up to the world that I'm actually living in. But I also mean facing up in the sense that I look up. In the face of all that, I choose life. I choose to look up as opposed to like give up or go face down, which is why I call this life beyond belief. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this video. I hope you will enjoy my story, and I hope too that one day I might get to hear yours.